It's the first time, I would say, in history we have a fuel that is able to be discharged and charged again using electricity. My name is Driss Laraqui. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Fenix Energy, a startup revolutionizing industrial heat production using iron as a fuel. This iron powder, when it's burnt, it generates iron oxide. And then you can see this fuel as a battery, because this iron oxide, you can get it and recharge it using electricity to reuse it as a fuel. The difference with other thermal storage solutions is that we are not stationary. It's a flexible and mobile source of energy.
Have you seen something change with your customers since the incident in the Strait of Hormuz?
Yeah, we've seen that you have teams currently in the industries looking for alternative sources of energy because they feel like it's a threat. So it's a threat for their industry.
If you are a regular listener of New Wave, I want to ask you for a small favor. I'm building this show solo, and every single week I'm trying my best to bring you top founders, investors, scientists, and operators shaping European climate tech. So if you enjoy these conversations, the best way to support the show is actually very simple. Follow the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review. It helps more people discover the show, helps me reach bigger guests, and helps keep these conversations going on week after week. In return for your support, I'll keep doing everything I can to bring you sharp conversation with the best voices in climate tech. On the problem itself, why do we need to electrify or change the way we produce heat today?
Well, as you may know, industrial heat in Europe relies mainly on fossil fuels, natural gas, so to say. The problem is natural gas is not produced in Europe, so you have to import it. So the problem is you rely on geopolitical issues, as we have seen the last years, and that impact directly the economics of this energy. So high volatility of prices. On top of that, you have CO2 emissions, so you have carbon taxation. So all of that are like the economical reasons, I would say, to switch to a new kind of fuel. And also you have the sovereignty aspect. So as you don't want to rely to external sources of energy for the reasons I mentioned earlier, you want to rely on a source that an energy source that you can find locally. Electricity, you can find it locally. The only thing is when you need high temperature heat, you need a fuel to burn. So that's why we use natural gas. But we need something else that is produced with a local source of energy, like electricity.
When you say high temperature, we're talking how much?
We can generate, for example, with iron fuel, up to 900 degrees. So you can address, I would say, 90%, 80% of industrial heat.
What are some of the biggest use cases for industrial heat?
For these high temperatures, you can address, for example, drying applications. For example, asphalt, you need drying of the aggregates. For example, to make plaster, you need drying. Multiple material transformation, I would say, require these temperatures.
You were talking about the geopolitics of heat, because as you said, so we rely a lot on natural gas. I'm curious, have you seen something change with your customers since the incident in the Strait of Hormuz, or has it not changed at all?
Yeah, we've seen that really, like you have teams currently in the industries working especially on finding alternatives to natural gas, innovation teams, R&D teams, looking for alternative sources of energy because they feel like it's a threat. So it's a threat for their industry. The fact that natural gas in 5 years' time had you have seen like high price volatility. The price tripled 3 years ago. It doubled this year. So basically, they see that as a threat. So they have now teams that source solutions to deploy them on site. So, and we talk with these people to help them. Yeah.
And they're mostly driven by the fact that they want to have a secure supply chain rather than price and CO2 emissions?
Yeah, the secure supply chain. Also, you have a high risk of in terms of supply. We see that frequently they are afraid that, for example, for continuous processes that have to run like 24/7, at high power output, they cannot stop their process. So if the fuel is not available, there is a high risk to shut down the activity, and it's really a pity for them. So there is also this supply risk, and that's what we are solving also with iron fuel, as it is locally sourced and circular. You don't have feedstock of the fuel dependency.
And I guess before we get into your solution, I mean, the obvious solution for me would have been to say, hey, what do we have locally? We're in France. We have a lot of electricity.
Mhm.
We have a surplus of electricity. Actually, we're selling to other countries. Um, so the logic would be to say, hey, can we just electrify the production of heat?
Mhm.
What's the blocker to electrify heat?
So the thing is, if we have surplus of electricity, but not the whole day or the whole year.
Hmm.
And that's the problem when you have a process that's running the whole year, 24/7, is that you need something that is cost effective the whole year. So you can use its surplus, but you need to store it to use it when electricity is higher. So you need a storage solution to do that. And also you need to be able, so if you want to electrify, you need to have the grid connection nearby. And 90% of the industrials don't have the grid connection nearby. So they basically cannot switch to direct electrification, and they need a way to store, but also to transport to their
Hmm.
site the energy.
And are we able technically to produce 500 to 900 degrees of temperature with electricity today?
Technologically speaking, you have solutions to produce with electricity high temperature, with resistive heating, for example. The only thing is to produce it at a cost-effective way, cost-competitive way with natural gas. You cannot plug your system and produce your heat with electricity full time, because you will be faced to the average electricity price during the year, which is closer to 100 euro per megawatt hour, while natural gas is around 40, 50 euro per megawatt hour, so double the price.
Okay, so the main problem that we have for now is electricity price.
Yeah, it's basically the average electricity price for continuous
Hmm.
processes if you directly electrify without storage.
Okay, well, let's talk about iron as a fuel
Yeah.
then. The first time I've heard about that, I was quite surprised. Seems like a bit of rocket science kind of solution to it. Help me understand. So, what exactly is the process that you're providing to your customers today?
So the process we are developing at Fenix is basically a boiler that is able to burn iron powder
Okay.
and generate heat without CO2 emissions at the same level of temperature than natural gas. And basically, the thing is that this iron powder, when it's burnt, it generates iron oxide. And then you can see this fuel as a battery, because this iron oxide, you can get it and recharge it using electricity to reuse it as a fuel. So that's a bit the difference. And the first time, I would say, in history, we have a fuel that is able to be discharged and charged again using electricity. So that's what we propose to our customers: a heat as a service solution, all in one solution with the heat production and storage solution.
But so, can we actually burn iron? Because I mean, for me, iron is not something that you would burn, or like theoretically, I would. I wouldn't say that's something I would burn. Like natural gas kind of makes sense. So how did you came across that in the first place?
Well, I did my PhD on the subject 10 years ago. Uh, I was not working on iron powder, I was working on magnesium and aluminum. It was for the automotive industry. You can easily see I worked for Stellantis to develop engines running on metallic powders. And I was one of the first researchers basically to apply this new kind of fuel in real energy applications. And when I saw that first, when I saw this PhD subject, I was like, okay, that's crazy subject. You can produce energy with a metal, you can recycle it. And I was like, I think I was crazy back then, because nobody was talking about the subject. To find a job after this PhD was a bit challenging, but I was like, okay, it's an innovation, it has potential. Let's see what happens after. I will do this PhD, and if it makes sense, I will find a way to to make it a reality. So indeed, I created Phoenix a few years after, in 2023. And we switch from automotive applications to industrial heat because basically car engines require billions of dollars to develop the engine, but for boilers, you need tens of millions of euros. So go to market is easier and development is easier. And also, it's the hardest, I would say, industrial heat is the hardest to abate sector. So that's where you have a need for alternatives. Whereas in automotive, you have some alternatives, interesting alternatives.
Okay. So let's get deeper into the solution. So you have a boiler. Is that a typical boiler that exists already with your customer? Or is that a gas boiler that you use?
No, we develop our own, I would say, boiler. Of course, we use standard equipments in the system. So so it's not a retrofit of a boiler. We develop our own, but using existing bricks, I would say.
How much does it cost?
So per megawatts thermal, the boiler would cost between 150 and 200K. Of course, it's a bit more expensive than natural gas boiler because you have transfer equipment for the powder, whereas in a natural gas boiler, you basically have just a burner. But yeah, the impact is minimal, I would say, in the total cost of the energy. What's interesting is what's really impacting the energy price is more like the electricity price initially, and the total capex, meaning boiler capex and regeneration capex for the.
Because you have two parts of it,
Yeah,
which is the boiler, which is basically burning the
yeah.
fuel, and the fuel for you is the iron. But then you have also the second part about the circular fuel. How does that work?
So basically, yeah, we have decoupled the charging and the discharging equipment. So it's two different equipments. So they are really independent in how they are working. So you have the discharging equipment, the boiler, and you have the charging equipment, which consists in electrolysis system and a I would say, thermochemical reactor that mixes the iron oxide coming from the boiler or from the iron ore initially, and a hydrogen, I would say, to make the reaction and generate metallic iron that is used as a fuel.
And is that unlimited? Because can you produce energy with the same powder for as many cycles as you want?
Yeah, basically, initially the powder is really, really cheap. We basically, if you look at iron ore prices, it's less than 100 euro per ton.
Okay.
And you can say that in 1 ton, you have approximately 2 megawatt hour of energy. So that's really a lot for not so much money, but you divide that money by 100, minimum 100, because you can recycle this fuel. So basically, the material, the feedstock, is really not expensive at all. It's really impacting few percent, even less, the total price of energy.
And so you said it can go for 100 cycles on
Yeah,
average.
yeah.
Is that basically degradation as it goes through the process multiple times?
Yeah, no, basically, it's not about degradation. It's more like because you have transfer equipments. So if you do it locally, so you regenerate the fuel with electricity on site, you have few meters from their boiler, then you can do thousands of cycles. If you have to transport the fuel from one grid connection where you do the storage to a customer that is 100 kilometers away, you have some powder sticking in the walls of the truck, for example, which is usual for a truck transporter. So they have to clean it with water. So basically, you can have some loss due to transfer of the powder.
Okay. And so the solution today, heat as a service, what do you provide exactly? So customers pay for you to provide them with heat. You take care of everything.
Yeah, that's basically the model. So we guarantee heat output to the customer, and he pays us the amount of heat we produced, and we carry all the capex related to the production of the fuel.
Was that also the case with gas boiler before?
It depends. Yeah, you have some energeticians, EPCs, what we call, that provide the full package. So you have the option. So either you buy the boiler and you buy energy contract, or you can find EPCs that provide the whole package in one heat as a service model.
And how does that change the economics? Because that's, I think, from a venture capital perspective, I'd love to understand better. You know, you move from people basically buying a boiler and then fueling it with gas that they had to pay on a regular basis, to a model where now you're providing them with heat as a service, and also you kind of on your side take care of a fuel that's basically not unlimited but quite circular. So walk me through the economics of it and the difference for customers.
So basically, when you propose heat as a service model, it's de-risking a lot for the customer when you're providing an innovation. And also, it's a utility, so they would prefer not to carry in their balance sheet the capex. So I would say it's accelerates the sales process, I would say, to convince them to switch to your technology because it's already integrated in the price of the heat, and they don't have to basically to take debt for a utility.
Mm,
They would prefer industrials to invest in their core production equipment than in a utility that produces heat. So that's
mm.
basically just to ease up the process. And we basically manage finding the funding for the capex through infrastructure funds, for example.
And do you install everything on their site? Because I guess you can't transport heat, right?
Yeah. So basically, you can transport iron because it's carrying potentially the heat. So as we say, it's a cold storage iron powder. So basically, you can store some iron on a site. They use it. So the iron boiler oxidize the iron, it generates iron oxide. And if the regeneration site is on site, we do the loop on the same place. Otherwise, you can carry it by truck
Mm.
to the regeneration site. So the difference with other thermal storage solutions is that we are not stationary. It's a flexible and mobile
Mm.
source of energy. So that's basically changing a lot this game because we can address industries that don't have the ability to produce the fuel on site using electricity. For example, asphalt plants, they cannot connect to the grid and do the regeneration because they don't have the power available to do that, but we can move around the fuel. So that's the good news. We can do that outside.
That's actually quite comparable in that sense to gas in the end, which is basically a powder is also something that you can carry around quite easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good energy carrier, so to
Yeah.
say, right?
Yeah. Basically. Yeah.
Where do you stand today with the company? Do you already have one gas boiler running? What's the story?
Yeah. So we have currently two boilers running. One 50 kilowatt, which was the first technological brick we developed before the seed. And we have also a 400 kilowatt boiler system that's currently running in Lyon. And we are deploying it on an industrial site by the end of this year. So to prove the TRL 7, I would say, maturity level.
Is that? It feels like it's quite fast actually to get there before Series A. What's your perspective?
Yeah, I would say it's probably, if you compare that to SMR or fusion reactors, it's way faster. So we are going at the speed of light. But yeah, I would say that what I felt with this technology, and that's why I built Fenix, that you really can see the markets really not far away from the R&D. And look, we are already doing a 400 kilowatt system in 1 year with only less than 10 people. Imagine what we could do, and we will be more people. And basically, with more funding, we can, I think, deploy quite fast the system all around Europe, for example.
And a 400 kilowatt system, how much money does that generate per year? Like, what's the average revenue you could make from that?
400 kilowatt system, basically, I have to do the math, basically, but I would say it's a few, maybe near to 100K or something.
Per year.
Yeah, per year. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Um, when you think about other technologies that are out in the market trying to compete for that industrial heat,
Mhm.
we've seen obviously many of them. What do you think goes into a choice for a customer when they're choosing Phoenix over someone else?
Mm. So basically, in this market, you have first, is there like a temperature compatibility? So that's the first filter. When they see our technology, they see that we can go up to 900 degrees. Okay, if they want 600, then It's validated. So you have this first filter. What's the technological compatibility with the process?
And on that, just help me understand technically, how does it work when you want to increase or decrease the temperature for your reactor?
So basically, you just change some parameters of the speed of the fluid you're heating. So the less fluid you put inside, the higher temperature. The more fluid you put, the lower the temperature. So it's just a difference of parameter, like of your program running on the automation. Yeah.
Okay. And customers are able to do it themselves, or do you have to set it up for them?
No, we set it up before we install it there, of course. Yeah. So, and the main, I would say, what would make the difference and what we see when we discuss with industrials between other technologies, because we compare to other thermal storage solutions. You have first the footprint of the storage equipment. So when you look at thermal storage, we need 100 times less footprint. So basically, when they think about thermal storage, maybe their goal usually is to do 5, 10, 20% of their total energy. With Fenix, they can scale up to 100% their total energy. So per site, we increase revenue and also increase carbon impact. And also, if they are not grid connected, they don't have to invest, for example, €1 million per megawatt electric
Hmm.
with Phoenix, because they just need to pay a few euro per megawatt hour on top of the usual price of the fuel to get it from outside of their site. So we basically, they know that nearby there is a neighbor industrial that has some grid capacity available, and we use it to produce the fuel and we ship it to him. So basically, an industrial would be interested to do that instead of investing in grid capacity on his site.
How do you set up the supply chain for that? Because when I think about a project like yours, um, I kind of I kind of see the project where everything runs on the side of the customer. That's quite easy. You just have
Mhm.
to ship them basically at the beginning some iron, and then as a result of that, they're basically able to run the fuel and burn the fuel and produce heat. On the other side, though, when you have to take care of it in another mm, site, basically, that becomes more difficult because then you have to manage the operation of moving back and forth. How does that work for you?
Well, it's similar to, I would say, biomass supply chain. So biomass supply chain is usually 50, 100 kilometers away. I would say managing 100 to 50 kilometers of truck distance. And that's what we are doing with Phoenix. So we have built a supply chain team. I'm also with my co-founder, Nawal. She's former supply chain director of Coca-Cola, EMEA. And she's basically helping in putting in place this supply chain. Well, basically, you work with transporters that carry bulk for other industries, and they just switch to iron powder. So it's, there is existing actors doing that.
Mm.
We are not reinventing this supply chain. We just manage basically I would say, the deliveries.
Is there a safety component to managing iron powder?
I would say iron is like way safer to store and transport than, for example, oil
Okay.
or even biomass, because
Oh, really?
yeah, because basically iron needs like 3,500 degrees to vaporize.
Okay.
So, the heat source you need to start propagating a flame is so high that you never find it in reality. And yeah, it's really the least explosive fuel you can find because of that reason. It's like the oxidation of the fuel occurs on the particle itself. It's not like a flame propagation through a gas. It's
Mm.
really like oxidation of particles. You see like sparks, like when you're cutting metal, you see spark. In Phoenix, we are just basically having a lot of sparks at a time in the reactor, and that generates heat. So you can really see that when you cut also the heat source, the flame shut down. So yeah, all of these things really makes it safe for either the customer or the transporter to use it.
Does that then create a harder challenge for you to burn it in the first place? I would imagine, right?
Yeah,
Because how do you set it up? How do you start the reaction?
yeah.
Um, and my understanding so far is that basically there is no chain reaction that will lead to this thing continuing to produce heat without any flame below it. So how does it work?
Yeah, that's definitely the other, I would say, part of the coin. I don't know if you say that in English, but basically the fact that it's safe also makes it harder to oxidize. And that gives value to Fenix because you need expertise to know how to oxidize the iron particle at a high efficiency. Because if you don't put the right amount of heat where you need it, you basically have you can have like really bad efficiencies. So that's what we're developing and patenting in our burner development.
Can you help me understand technically what does that look like
Yeah.
in practice? What do you need to do to burn the fuel?
So you need to heat it up actually to, I would say, over 800 degrees. So what we use is a small pilot flame, a gas flame, which represent 1 to 5% of the total power of the boiler. And that's the easiest way, I would say, to do it. You have other ways to do it by electrifying the heating system for the particles. But the easy thing to do with small impact is using a pilot flame, and you usually find pilot flames in hydrogen boilers or biomass boilers for safety reasons, and we are doing just that.
Okay, so you still need some gas, but it's a very limited amount.
It's a very limited amount, yeah.
And do you then never stop the reaction? In other words, do you have to then put the iron into the boiler as it's going, basically to have like a continuous production of heat,
Yeah.
so that you don't have to put up the flame again? Or do you always have to have the flame running?
Yeah, you always have the flame running,
Okay.
although you can, after a number of hours, you can shut it down, but as I said, it's a pilot flame is seen as I would say, a way to control your heat production in the system. So it's always good to keep it. And the CO2 impact is so low, like it's 5%. So it really doesn't bother our customers, at least for now.
And is the only thing that comes out of it is heat actually, or do you have anything else that comes out on the other side?
So it's a really clean, I would say, exhaust gas. So what's coming out of the reaction is nothing less than nitrogen that is already found in air, and some excess oxygen. And the iron oxide is captured in filters. So at the end, you have like few NOx, what we call NOx. So it's a gas that you can find also in natural gas boiler, which is regulated, and we produce 10 times less than natural gas of this gas. And it's the only thing we produce besides iron oxides.
Why have you selected iron specifically and not any other metal?
So iron is, I would say, mainstream. It's like the mainstream metal on Earth. So it's used for steel production. So there is already a big industry running to produce that, to use the iron ore, to extract iron ore. So we have made like before I created Phoenix, I was like, okay, why not use aluminium, and then why not use magnesium? The only thing is that if you want to produce clean magnesium or aluminium, you need a technology that doesn't exist yet without CO2 emissions. So currently it's using electrolysis to produce aluminium, but it emits a lot of CO2. And the low carbon version is coming in 10, 15 years. Whereas for iron, you already can do it now using green hydrogen as a way to recycle the fuel. So these are the two reasons why.
So we can actually produce clean iron as of today already.
Yeah.
Is that at the same price as I would say, dirty iron?
I would say you would avoid using dirty iron, so from carbon coke iron production. So usually you don't use hydrogen, you use coke as a way to produce your iron for steel, whereas basically we use hydrogen. But you can also imagine, so you don't want to use that one
Why?
because then your carbon impact is worse than burning coal. So you don't want to.
But industrials would rather care about their price than their.
Yeah. But I mean, no, because otherwise they would have been burning coal instead of natural gas, because coal is cheaper than natural gas. But basically, yeah, they are really wanting to have something competitive with natural gas with less CO2 emissions, and that's what we propose. We don't want to come back to something near to coal impact. Yeah.
And you don't produce the iron yourself, right? The iron powder.
Yeah, the iron powder, you can find it as a fine particles in the iron ore initially. So you don't need to make it yourself initially. So basically, you just sieve it to have the small particles, and the rest is going through for steel production, and the fines are used for Fenix for its fuel.
And we produce it in Europe.
The production, so the iron ore is, you can find them basically the mines of iron ore, you can find them all around the world. I would say that in any country, not far from a country, you can find, or inside, you can find an iron ore mine. In Europe, you have like famous ones in Sweden, for example. And as we reuse it again and again, we just need to ship it once at start. For example, you buy like 3 months of stock of iron ore, and you run with it for 20 years.
Is that as long as that, basically? Because like how much? I'm trying to understand. So you said you can use it roughly speaking 100 times, maybe more if you're on site. Um, I'm trying to think in terms of volumes. How much can you store on site of a customer? How much space does that take? Because as you said, I mean, if it doesn't take a lot of space, why not just buy a lot of it and then you're good for like 20,
Yeah.
30 years, right?
Yeah, that's what basically we propose, that when we basically propose a contract with a customer, we evaluate the stock he needs and we buy how much he needs for 20 years.
And that's
Consider,
very cheap, right?
yeah, it's very cheap. For example, we did a calculation, 600 megawatt hour of energy, which represents 6 megawatt for 100 hours, for example. It only costs like 20K or something like this.
Okay, so that's like not a big consideration
Yeah.
for customer. Um, I guess what are some of the hardest parts of that business? So, when we think about collecting, transporting, regenerating the oxide, where do you think it can fail?
I would say that all of the bricks exist, but then you have to coordinate the whole ecosystem. So that's the hard thing. So you have, of course, some R&D development, but I think we are more in the D than the R, so more in the development phase than the research phase. So yeah, but you need to build an ecosystem for basically have the supplier for the electrolyzer at the competitive cost. You need to have the right suppliers for your boiler equipment. You need to have the right skills in your teams to manage the buying of electricity cheap, to manage the development of the boilers. I would say it's just about coordinating well on the whole ecosystem, but the bricks are already there.
So the science is not the problem.
Science, I would say, no, it's more engineering at our stage.
Okay. When did you realize that it was actually possible to do it? And I guess as a second thought process in that question is also, when did you realize you could do it at scale? Because it's probably great to burn some fuel in the lab. That's great,
Mm.
but then it doesn't really impact the world. So kind of thinking through, okay, when did you realize you could actually make it a business?
Well, when we did the first calculations based on operational data for the different CAPEX, OPEX, so when you make the calculations with real data of price of electricity, with real data of the suppliers for the different equipments we use, because we did quotations this year, so we have all the data and the experience to say, okay, we think that we can be competitive with natural gas. We did in 1 year the development of a boiler. We are confident that it's running well. So when you have all these elements combining, you feel like, okay, we are ready to scale up the technology and deploy it in the next years.
And what's the risk in scaling this process? Is that do you have to re-engineer the reactor? What's kind of because scaling could mean multiple things, right? You could also line up small reactors. You could do a
Mhm,
bigger one.
mhm.
What does that look like for you?
One thing I learned interesting when building a startup is, in terms of engineering, is thinking about modular, like have a modular thinking. and modular way of engineering. And I saw that with other startups that are developing like industrial systems. Modularity really helps you shorten your R&D phase and accelerate your deployment, because then you can stack your modules and go up to the power you need. The only thing is that you have to find your critical size for the module, where you reach your best capex, for example. And when you have found it, you can just, say to the engineering team, okay, we don't need to do bigger. We do that module. And then if someone wants bigger, we will stack them. And really, this thinking in engineering with modularity really unlocks like faster R&D phases. And that's something I learned with Fenix. And I feel like it's for us the way to go, and that's what we're doing.
How do we find the right size?
Well, you you basically explore different designs. You ask your suppliers how much would it cost to make a heat exchanger that size, doubling it, tripling it in size, and then you will realize that you will find the perfect size where the price per megawatt is, for example, in our case, price per megawatt is optimal. So basically, you work with your suppliers and fabricators. So you need to find really patient, I would say, suppliers to work with them, that's how you do.
Is that something? I mean, thinking about your career, have you learned that from Stellantis before? Because I would say that it's quite the opposite. Actually, they do big factories, and everything has to be big. Curious, where have you learned that? Because I think that's quite an interesting insight into your business and how you want to run it.
Yeah, where so I learned that, I would say, along the way with Phoenix, because before that I was a researcher, so economical consideration were not really taken into account. The most important thing was to make the system work. Of course, you have you use public funding, so you have some budget limitations, but you're not really trying to optimize that much. But I would say, it's along the way you realize the constraints of building a startup, of the runway, the cash burn, and then you are thinking like, okay, how do I optimize everything to make sure I basically survive long enough to have something deployed? And it's just a thought process along the way.
How do you think actually about financing that business? Because you're probably at a stage where it becomes quite interesting, where you can actually start deploying with customers. So there's a bit of either customer revenue, or they can pre-finance the equipment. How do you think about that today for your business?
So the business model currently, what we think about it is make the heat as a service model, and we think that's what will make the technology mainstream. But the first systems, it would be hard to finance them through the customers and the infrastructure funds or the banks, because you're at low maturity for them. So for them, good maturity is TRL 8, 9. So basically, they won't finance the whole system, maybe some standard equipment. So you need basically to find the right partners as customers. So your first customers are your strongest partners. Basically, it's not, we don't see them only as customers, we see them as partners. So we build a relationship with them, we take time with them to explain the technology, the potential for their business. And as they, along the way, they see our realization, they want to get involved, and they basically help us in the first bricks, I would say, financing the equipment. But we know that if we want to go mainstream, then after, we will have to, of course, integrate this heat as a service model. But then it's okay, because the TRL will be high enough to do that.
So basically, it's proving that it works with one customer, and then once you do that,
Yeah,
you can scale. Um, why do you think the first customers are willing to do that with you?
because they have they see that basically they are struggling to find alternatives to natural gas, and their role is to find alternative. And they have pressure, economical pressure. They have internal pressure to either decarbonize, but also get a sovereign source of energy. So they see that our technology, for some of them, is the only way out of natural gas. So we are basically helping them achieve these goals. So that's why they are helping us.
Next year is going to be interesting. Or I mean, starting in September, you said you will start to deploy the larger reactor. Um, what's the main risk? What's the main key criteria of success when we think about deploying the first I would say larger one because the first
Mm,
one was quite small.
yeah. The criteria of success. I mean, these are the elements we built with the customer. So basically, what they want to see is that the system is running without disturbing the process. Either the operators nearby, either the process itself. They want to see that we have a good way to we are in a good path for a good efficiency on the reactor, and basically validate all the techno-economical data we gave them to project for a cost per megawatt hour using our system. So yeah, it's a total of these things.
Okay. Look, maybe one last section, so to say, for today. But you're obviously scaling a deep tech startup from Europe. I'm just trying to think through, is Europe a great place to innovate, and specifically in deep tech? What's your perspective on it?
I would say I cannot talk about the whole deep tech ecosystem, but for climate tech part of the deep tech, I would say Europe is really a great continent for climate tech because first there is an ETS tax, carbon tax, which puts more pressure to decarbonize. Um, for other consideration, Europe has difficulty to find a new kind of fuel that can replace natural gas. So I would say there is this geographical context also. I would say also that in terms of financing and capital, you find a lot of VCs and funds that really see the elements I told you earlier around the geographical and geopolitical situation around energy in Europe. And so they are funding a lot startups on these subjects. You have also, for the same reasons, the public funding from Europe. And we have also had some success in getting public funding from Europe. So yeah, I think in the climate tech part of the deep tech, cannot talk about the other sectors. I would say it's quite a good place to start these kinds of ventures.
I love it because a lot of people complain about the lack of capital, the lack of support for early stage climate tech and deep tech startup. I love that you have at least a positive point of view on it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's not in my nature to complain about things because I always try to see the good things. Because when you look at how Phoenix started, basically in the garage, it's a bit cliche, but and now we have the ability to recruit people, develop the system, deploy it. I really cannot complain about this, but maybe generally speaking, I think Europe can improve in getting more capital through pension funds if it can get to France or other countries in Europe. But yeah, I think you can say that, but in the same time, you can also say that
Hmm.
there are multiple positive things in Europe.
And will your market be only France or Europe? What's the ambition behind the company?
We already have a interested customer in Africa, in North Africa. Well, I can say Morocco. We see a lot of potential outside of Europe also, and we are going step by step. But of course, I see the technology going further than Europe. We have sometimes some discussions with people in Vietnam. I think we did the calculation one day with one of our engineer. I think we discussed with 30 countries globally since the creation of Phoenix because first they are all curious about the technology and then they realize the potential it has. But of course, you need to focus first on the first market. But I see that technology to be deployed worldwide. Yeah.
And is that going through licensing, or do you see yourself actually just building many many reactors in chains, or?
No, 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 no. Of course, yeah. It can go through licensing with our patents. It can go through with JVs, for example. Yeah, we currently look at these different ways of scaling outside. Mm.
Well, maybe to finish this episode, I'd like to just open a bit the kind of to the future of the energy system. So A few short questions, but when we think about Fenix and if Fenix works, what does the industrial energy system looks like in 10 years? Because I think you're part of the solution, and I think there's been a lot of changes.
Yeah, I think with energy you have to think like always. Energy has to work as a mix of things because there will be some places where iron won't work, some places where it's better to use biomass, some places where you can use SMR. And when sometimes I have discussions in events with people doing SMR, for example, they also know that, and we already try to find synergies together with other technologies, how to make let's say commercial collaboration to have complementary solution. For example, if you take an SMR, it can do like really well stable production of energy. Phoenix solution can do the peak, the variation, so you can combine both solution on the site. So at Phoenix, we know that the solution will come from a mix of all the solutions, and each one needs to go where it's the best. And so that's what I see things in terms of energy mix. And we are basically bringing a new brick to this energy mix for I would say the industrials that struggle to electrify. And we think that's 80% of the market, but they can also, some of them, use biomass, use SMR, for example.
What do you think most people misunderstand about industrial heat?
What they mean, I think, yeah, the fact that they think one solution can solve everything. For example, okay, we do only electrification. I think that's a mistake. You need to think about the whole ecosystem, as I said earlier.
What's one of your own belief that has changed in the last 12 or 24 months since you've kind of started the company?
Mm, uh, hmm, it's a tough question. No, because there's many things that I've realized along the way, and first of all, it's I mean, no matter how much you believe on a technology, you need to be able to explain it to the people, for example, for financing your customers, and yeah, so there is really this thing of finding a way to put yourself in the shoes of the person in front of you, to make sure he understands the potential. And I think that's really something I worked on during the. I mean, I'm a researcher at start, so I had to work on how to explain things, and that's one thing I learned, I would say, along the way.
And I like it because I think that's a really great advice for entrepreneurs as well. Listening to this podcast, which is if you want to pitch investors on a technology like Phoenix, for example, like you have to be aware that they'll look at the economics of it,
Yeah.
that the technology is only part of the solution, but it also has to work in the economical context around it. You have to understand that they probably don't have the technical knowledge that you have. So I think it's always a great advice. If people want to help you today, what's one thing they can do? Are you hiring people? Are you looking for investors, partners? I don't know.
Yeah, so we soon are going to do our Series A. I mean, yeah, if some people think that they can help us continue to grow and do our engineering, we always look for partners in engineering, in supply of the systems. We do our Series A, as I say, in by the end of this year, we start the roadshow. So if you know investors that might be interested, they can get to us. We can add them in the list. And yeah, I would say it would be
I love that, and I hope
great.
people will come and reach out to you. Well, listeners, if you like this episode and if you like the show, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube, or to give us a follow and a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Driss, thank you so much.
Thanks, you.